It's like a great song, which is really hard to do with stand-up, to make people want to listen to it again, even when they know what's coming.
At the end of this set, I remember Conan, he always says something really nice, but because I'm incredibly insecure, I always compare it to things he said to other people on the show. And I'm like, I've heard him say things really nice about sets that I was like, that really wasn't that good. And whatever the point is that he said it reminded him of Bob Newhart, and I had to pinch myself because that man was my North Star.
A lot of work goes into a short late-night stand-up set. Join me, JP Buck, as I spotlight the comedians who came up with some of my favorite Conan sets. This is The Setup.
Please welcome back to the show the very funny Gary Gulman.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to recommend a documentary to everyone, and then I'm going to go. It's about the men and one woman who abbreviated all 50 states down to 2 letters.
On my list every year, every January, one of my things is get Gary Gulman.
Oh.
And man. I feel like I nag you sometimes.
No, I'm overwhelmed. But we've talked about it before that I feel like this will sound so obnoxious, but it's the truth. The bar is pretty high, so I have to come with something good. It can't be, I almost feel like it can't be just a collection of good jokes. It has to be one really long, good joke. So the premise, which was, why do all the states start with the same letter, and how difficult it would have been to abbreviate them, knowing that premise was in my notebook, and I had tried it 2 years into comedy or less. I can remember, and every year I used to call it Old Ironsides, because there's this ship in Boston that once a year they take it out into the harbor, work the barnacles off, and it's from like the Civil War, the War of 1812, and I used to truck it out every year, make sure it didn't work, and then put it back into my warehouse. And I knew I wanted to hold on to it because nobody else had that joke.
I remember this was 2016, it was February of 2016. We had a dark week, which is a week that we're not taping shows. And I went to Jeff Ross, our executive producer, and I told him that I wanted to spend a week and just stay in New York and be able to bounce around and follow people. And I was working on a set with Leonard Oots, and he just texted me. He's like, I'm going to be at the Cellar tonight if you want to come by. So it was like a 9 o'clock show. We were upstairs in the bar, and then word reached us that you were going on stage. And so it was like 3 of us went down the back stairs. But I remember just sitting in the back in the corner, and we were all just watching you. And I was amazed.
And you sent me this great text at the end of the night. I think you said, do you know anybody who has a joke about abbreviating the states? I'd like to put him on Conan, and that I jumped for joy. Thanks very much. I just wanted to recommend a documentary to everyone, and then I'm going to go.
When you do this in a headlining set, how is it different? Because if you're doing a 45 to an hour, saying that you're going to get out of here, you can't do that when you first walk out.
No, it's purely for 10, 15-minute sets. It's about the men and one woman who abbreviated all 50 states down to 2 letters. All you have to know for this is that we have 50 states in America, and they each have a 2 capital letter abbreviation. But that wasn't always the case, up until, I want to say, 1973. And so I will. Now, I read this description to the documentary, and much like you, thought to myself, how are they going to make a 98-minute documentary about a task that couldn't have taken more than 6 minutes to complete? Boy, was I wrong. It was an adventure. Ups and downs, ins and outs, friends became enemies, enemies became friends. They started off, they thought it was going to be easy because Alabama lulled them into a false sense of security. They said, Alabama, AL, holy crap, this is easy. We're going to finish before they stop serving breakfast in the hotel restaurant. And the boss said, guys, if we finish before they stop serving breakfast, breakfast is on me. And then one guy said, I hope they have an omelet station. Just for context, the omelet station had just been invented, and it was sweeping the nation.
Do you actually know when the omelet station was invented?
No, absolutely not. But I know that during my lifetime, there was no omelet station. And then later, there was.
Did the Omelet Chef exist on its own at one point?
Yeah, of course. The Omelet Chef was a separate joke based on the fact that I loved omelets, but was so intimidated by an omelet chef on vacation that I would have my girlfriend at the time go and get me an omelet because I was so intimidated by the angry omelet chef, but also had so much empathy because I thought about it. I was like, yeah, I wouldn't want to be the omelet chef either.
And this other guy said, you know what, I'm not comfortable with the omelet station because I feel like the omelet chef resents you. Like he didn't want to be the omelet chef. Nobody dreams of being omelet chef. He wanted to be the chef. And now instead of giving the orders, he's taking the orders from your stupid wife and your ugly kids. And I think one day he's gonna snap and I don't want to be there when it happens. And they were like, well, why don't you just get Eggs Benedict? And he said, I don't like holiday sauce. And he said, did you just say holiday sauce? Yeah, why? Because it's hollandaise, you moron?
At this point, I think the audience just forgets why we're here, which I love. Like, I don't care where we started or if we ever achieve what you say we were going to achieve. I'm just enjoying being here in this omelet station conversation.
Right. I mean, the whole thing with the omelet chef joke was that it was always very, very weak, or as they say backstage at Conan, it was soft, right? Do you sometimes say that about a joke? It was soft. So it was never really a big joke, but it was in joke form and was enough of a distraction for the people to forget what we were doing, so that when I go back to AL as the abbreviation, people were like, oh man, that's a weird dude right there.
And then the boss said, guys, I hate to be a nudge, but could we get back to abbreviating the states? We still have 49 left. And apologies were made and an understanding was reached, and they got back to abbreviating. They said, what's next? They said, Alaska. Everybody cool with AL?
Can you tell how good of a show it's going to be at that laugh right there? Who's actually paying attention?
I knew that by the time I got to that laugh from just doing it 100 times, that I was home free. Everything from this point on is really, I'm not going to lose them at this point because it's very joke heavy. I was relieved at 2:42, as it turns out.
2:42 is how long you had to wait.
But somebody caught it. One man sheepishly raised his hand and said, sir, I think we might have used that one before. Are you sure? I'm pretty sure. Well, let's check the minutes. Dottie, read the minutes back to us, hon. Dottie was the wisecracking secretary. Every 1970s office had a wisecracking secretary, and this one's name was Dottie. And Dottie was a pistol. You would love, she was a real hot ticket. Dottie, listen to what Dottie said. They said, Dottie, read the minutes. How Dottie is this? He said, read the minutes back to us. This is so Dottie. And she goes, you mean the minute?
I was at a restaurant in New York City, and I overheard a woman talking to her friend about one of her zany exploits. And she said, how Jody is that? And her friend said, so Jody. And it was like, I just cringed, and I was like, oh, what kind of people speak of themselves and they have a certain, like this is the character I play in my life.
Oh, Dottie, what are we gonna do with you? Spank my ass and make me a martini? Dottie, you're incorrigible. Now read the minutes back to us, you Randy Minks. And she said, it's hollandaise, you moron. Et tu, Dottie. How do you know Shakespeare? You don't know hollandaise. That's a paradox.
That is such a throwaway line, but I love it so much that you bring Shakespeare into it. It's just like completely unnecessary.
That again is from college, and I mean, you must hear this all the time. You use, by the time you're 25 years into comedy, you use everything that's ever come across your brain.
So what's next? Arizona, AI, there we go, we're back on track. Next, Arkansas, shit.
That is, I think, the only time I ever swore on television like that. But I mean, because I said crap earlier, because you don't want to say, I think you're only allowed one shit, but
We're allowed 2 shits an hour.
Okay. So I didn't want to use it up. And also had Conan wanted to use one at some point, then I wouldn't have had any. And it just, when you say shit on a show that you're not allowed to say shit, I mean, they're not expecting that. So it really worked well. And it's worth saving. It's like one of those things in a video game. You don't want to use all the power pellets right away. You want to use it for the right moment.
By the time they got to Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, followed by Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, and Missouri, shots were fired. They were at each other's throats. So they did what any savvy business would do. They hired a consultant. They brought in a contractor. I'm sorry, not a contractor, a contractor. A man... A man who made words smaller by combining them or apostrophizing them.
I will say that was one of those mistakes that I made one night that wound out being funny, because I used to just go right to, they hired a contractor, and one time I said it wrong, and it was funnier saying it wrong, so I kept saying it wrong, and it was helpful. It's just one of those lucky mistakes.
This guy was the best. He was a legend within that world. Like, you wouldn't know his name, but you know his work. Like, he wrote such timeless classics as O'Clock. Many years ago, people would say it's 9 of the clock, it's 10 of the clock. This visionary said we don't need the
That is so much fun to say. We don't need the
Sometimes you say things and you're like, nobody is going to like this. And then when they do like it, it's such a great feeling. It's also really, really silly. Really silly.
He also wrote would've, could've, should've, the holy trinity of regret. He wrote the very innovative we'd've. He looked at we would have and said, I can do that in half the letters. And he was not without controversy. He also wrote the most controversial contraction of all time. He wrote won't. People said, how are you going to abbreviate will not use a single L? And he said, watch me. Are you saying I won't be able to do it? I just did. Thank you very much, everybody.
You had a different closer.
Yeah, long story short, they made it on time for breakfast, but it seemed contrived and cute.
What I love is that you never finish the conversation, the explanation of the 50 seats.
I mean, I guess I owe Christopher Nolan for that, because he made it so that you really didn't have to tie up all the loose ends. The people who wanted the loose ends tightened up, those people are not capable of abstract thinking, and so it's an opportunity to be judgmental.
Demo therapy called this the Bohemian Rhapsody of stand-up acts.
Oh wow! I think it's more of the jump around, because if you remember, Queen had more hits than Bohemian Rhapsody, but that's a terrific compliment.
Eric Shepard says, I've been saying woulda, coulda, shoulda my whole life, but never had the imagination available to refer to it as the holy trinity of regret. That was epic.
Wow. Oh, that's really nice. That was a late ad. That was probably the last few months of its run before the show. I mean, the thing that is always fun with a joke is to put your worldview and your neuroses into the cracks of the joke, so that if you were really trying to analyze this person, you would, the whole thing is really a cry for help and attention, and my neuroses are on display, but it was appealing enough to me that I left it in there.
You have been such a supporter of comedians. I get more emails from you about other comedians, and it makes my job so much easier, because if they pass the Gary test, it's like, okay, well.
I know there are some comedians who close the door behind them, entertainers who do that, and I always resented it with great vigor. And I never wanted to be that guy, because I'm reliant on so many comedians who brought me along and recommended me and talked me up. And you have one that you work with, Brian Kiley was a guy who talked me up and brought me along for so many years, and it's just, it would be the height of selfishness if I weren't to try to do that. And also the thing they don't tell you about altruism is that it feels terrific. There has to be some sort of evolution in us that helping other mammals makes us feel really good. I think it's so important in stand-up is that we're artists, and we should try to push the form further ahead, and you do that by touting people who you also get to sort of curate your taste. So I get to say, this is the type of comedian I want to see on Conan. It's not hyperbole to say that appearance changed my career significantly. And one thing that I wanted to mention was that it got some notice when it first ran, and then sometime between 9 months and a year later, Patton Oswalt shared it on Facebook, and that made it go viral, I think. And that was what made it so that I noticed more people at my shows. And once you have your own audience, you're able to do more jokes like that. So it's just built on itself. So I'm eternally grateful for that.